When we typically think of hunger, our minds often go straight to the physical signals, right? That rumbling stomach, or maybe you feel a dip in blood sugar.
Yeah, it feels very physiological, just body stuff.
Exactly. But what if hunger is actually, far more complex, maybe a deeper message that lives beyond just those physical cravings?
That's precisely what we want to unpack in this deep dive. We're exploring that deeper dimension, what Dan Hollis calls emotional hunger,
Okay.
and crucially, how tools like semaglutide can create this really unique window for us to actually understand it better.
A window. Interesting.
Yeah. So our mission today is really to move beyond that surface level view of weight management. We want to uncover the hidden questions our cravings might actually be asking.
What's underneath the craving?
Exactly. And learn how to navigate this whole journey with, well, both empathy and a deeper sense of awareness.
And we're drawing directly from Dan Hollis's teachings for this.
Yes. All the insights today come straight from his work, particularly what's highlighted in what Dan Hollis taught me
Huh.
about emotional hunger and also about weight loss setbacks.
Okay, great. So let's start at the beginning then. Most of us, I think, grew up thinking hunger is pretty straightforward. A simple physical need, body needs fuel, sends a signal, end of story.
The standard view.
But Dan Hollis really challenges that. He has this pretty revolutionary perspective suggesting emotional hunger isn't just a craving, it's something more.
He frames it so powerfully. Dan actually says emotional hunger sounds like a craving, but it's actually a question, a need asking to be seen.
Wow, a question. That changes things.
It's a fundamental shift, isn't it, how we interpret those urges,
Yeah.
moving away from just reacting.
So it's not just your stomach growling, but maybe an emotional whisper telling you something deeper is going on.
Precisely. And that's where you see how deeply intertwined our emotions get with our relationship with food. It's not just physical anymore.
Yeah, you think about it. Loneliness, boredom, anxiety, even happiness sometimes.
Right. All those feelings get wrapped up into what we think is hunger. It goes way beyond just needing calories.
Okay, so how does semaglutide fit into this picture? Many people know it as Ozempic or Wegovy.
Right. So at its core, it's a medication, a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Basically, it helps regulate appetite and blood sugar.
Okay.
It mimics a natural hormone that makes you feel fuller, reduces those intense cravings, slows down how quickly your stomach empties. It was originally for type 2 diabetes.
But it turned out to be really effective for weight loss, too.
Exactly. Huge impact there. But, and this is really important, Dan Hollis offers a crucial warning here.
Which is?
Semaglutide isn't a fix in itself. That's key. He sees it as something more profound. He calls it a window or a biological pause.
A window or a pause.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that? How does it create this unique opportunity you mentioned?
Well, he means it lowers the volume. It quiets those really intense physical cravings that might have been drowning everything else out before.
Ah, okay, so it clears some space.
Right. It creates this quiet space, allowing the underlying emotional hunger to finally come forward. It makes it visible, maybe for the first time for some people.
So it's not solving the root emotional issue, but it's creating the quiet needed to even see it clearly.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And, when that food scaffolding, that structure of emotional support you might have unconsciously built with food, when that gets pulled away,
Yeah.
well, you're going to feel exposed, maybe a bit raw, a bit vulnerable.
That makes sense.
But as Dan Hollis says, that's okay. That's the work.
Yeah.
That's actually where the real transformation can start.
Right, that is the work, not just the weight loss itself.
Absolutely. And Dan's framework is all about learning to, as he puts it, separate signal confusion.
Signal confusion.
Yeah. He teaches us to observe the craving, not obey it. It's about giving yourself that moment, that space, to decode what the hunger really means, what's its true message, instead of just automatically reaching for food.
Observe, don't obey. I like that.
Right.
And just to be clear, Dan isn't against the medication itself, right?
Oh, not at all.
Mm.
No, in fact, he sees semaglutide's greatest strength as the time it provides. That pause.
Okay.
It offers this really unique opportunity to reflect, to maybe reset some old patterns, and to genuinely start rewiring your relationship with food. It's a chance to build new, healthier responses.
So the medication creates the quiet, and his framework helps you use that quiet effectively.
Exactly. He sums it up so well when he says, semaglutide isn't the solution to emotional eating. It's the silence that lets you find one.
That's powerful. The silence lets you find the solution.
Yeah. And that silence, look, It can be uncomfortable at first, definitely,
That's great.
especially if food was your main coping mechanism.
Sure.
But ultimately, it's clarifying. It allows you to finally hear what you couldn't before,
Yeah.
beneath all the noise of the cravings.
And what's really fascinating here, you mentioned Dan connects emotional hunger to identity disconnection. What does he mean by that? Losing track of who we are.
Yeah, essentially, it's about a kind of misalignment between your authentic self, who you truly are or
Mm.
want to be, and the actions you're taking day to day. If you're not living in a way that feels true to your values or your desires, there could be this void, this gap.
Hmm.
And when that void appears, food can sometimes step in as a quick, easy way to try and fill it, though ultimately it's unfulfilling, of course.
Right. A temporary patch.
Exactly. And this leads to another really powerful Dan Hollis quote. You don't hold on to weight loss with discipline, you hold on to it with alignment.
Wow. Okay, that really shifts things from the usual focus on pure willpower, doesn't it?
Totally. It's less about forcing yourself, more about changing your deeper narrative, your internal story.
So it's about, as he says, replacing the story, not just the snack.
That's it, exactly. You can white knuckle your way through a diet using sheer discipline for a while, maybe.
Hmm.
But for lasting change, for maintaining it, you really need to address the underlying story, the narrative that drove the emotional eating in the first place.
That makes so much sense. And this perspective must completely change how we look at weight loss setbacks, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because traditionally we see them as failures,
Right.
something to feel ashamed about.
Yeah, the default reaction.
Mm.
But Dan's view is so transformative here. He reframes them entirely. He says setbacks are predictable, not shameful.
Predictable, not shameful. That feels so much more compassionate and realistic.
It really is. He explains there are often just moments when your body and brain are trying to recalibrate, trying to adjust to the changes.
So not a sign you're lazy or broken.
Not at all. They're signals that you're human. That's it. And it's also worth noting his insight that most people don't relapse into hunger. They relapse into confusion.
Confusion. Interesting. What does he mean by that?
It's that feeling of disorientation, maybe overwhelm, when old patterns or triggers resurface.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily physically ravenous, you're just lost for a moment. The old path lights up.
Okay. And he uses an analogy for this, doesn't he? The spiral staircase?
Yes,
Oh.
such a helpful visual. He describes weight loss not as a straight linear path upwards, but like a spiral staircase.
Yeah.
Meaning, you might feel like you're going in circles sometimes, maybe revisiting old habits or feelings, but, and this is the crucial part, you are still climbing. You're still making progress upward, even if it feels like you're covering familiar ground.
I love that. Still climbing takes the pressure off needing constant linear progress.
Right, and that ties directly into his wisdom that fast results don't mean lasting results. Pacing is protection. Slowing down is actually beneficial.
So when you hit a plateau, for instance.
It's not a personal failing. Dan explains that's often your body just catching up, your metabolism asking for a little grace, needing time to adapt to the new normal.
Okay. And what about when cravings do come back? Because they sometimes do, even with medication.
Yeah, and that's not weakness either, according to Dan. He calls it memory.
Memory.
Yeah, like a neural path lit up asking if it still mattered, an old signal firing.
Ah.
But now, because of that window semaglutide might offer, that quiet space, you have a chance to respond differently to that memory. You don't have to automatically follow the old path. You can forge a new one.
Break the cycle.
Exactly. Because, as he also points out, your body changes fast. Your identity takes time to catch up. There's often a lag.
That's a really key point. The body changes, but the mind, the identity, needs time.
Right. So a setback doesn't automatically mean the medication stopped working or that you've failed. It often just means the story you were telling yourself still needs updating. The internal narrative hasn't quite caught up with the physical changes yet.
It always seems to come back to that internal story, doesn't it?
It really does. It all circles back to semaglutide giving you that space, that pause, and Dan's work teaching you how to actually use that space constructively.
So how does he suggest we use that space when facing a setback?
He taught us to narrate the setback differently, not as a judgment, oh, I messed up again, but as a question.
A question, like the emotional hunger itself.
Exactly. It's about approaching it with curiosity, not condemnation, asking yourself some key things.
And what are those essential questions Dan encourages us to ask?
When you find yourself in that moment, that setback, he encourages pausing and asking, what am I feeling right now? What do I truly need? Not just what I'm craving, but what's the underlying need? And Looking forward, who do I want to become?
What am I feeling? What do I
Yeah.
need? Who do I want to become? Those are powerful.
They really reframe the whole experience, don't they? Suddenly, a setback might not mean you're losing ground at all. It might just mean you're learning.
Yeah.
You're gathering crucial information for the next step up that spiral staircase.
That's a much more empowering way to look at it. So,
Yeah.
for anyone listening who might be on this journey, maybe using semaglutide, the invitation is to see it less as just a weight loss drug.
And more as that miracle pause, as Dan calls it, an invitation to really focus on the window it opens.
Right, the window for deeper self-discovery, not just focusing solely on the number on the scale.
Exactly. Take that opportunity. Ask yourself those deeper questions. What am I truly hungry for beyond food?
Mhm.
What emotional or maybe even spiritual needs require support now that food isn't filling those gaps in the same way?
It sounds like Dan Hollis's approach is really grounded in self-compassion.
Absolutely. He reminds us constantly that healing emotional hunger, building that alignment, it takes empathy, not judgment, awareness, not rules, and curiosity, not punishment.
Empathy, awareness, curiosity, that feels like a sustainable path.
It really does. Much more than rules and punishment anyway.
Definitely.
Hmm.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe the final thought for people to mull over, drawing from Dan's work.
Yeah, here's something profound he points out, something to really sit with. When the cravings stop, the truth begins.